Amateurism is officially dead in college football. What does it mean for paying players, NIL, collectives, and more? We'll break it all down for you here on Locked On SEC.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers who are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com. All right, college sports changed radically on Friday night. Schools will begin directly paying their athletes in less than a month, thanks to a legal settlement that was officially approved in federal court Friday evening. Judge Claudia Wilkin out in Oakland, I believe, said the deal will create groundbreaking changes in NCAA rules that govern student-athlete compensation. The House versus NCAA settlement ends 3 separate federal antitrust lawsuits, all of which claim the NCAA was illegally limiting the earning power of college athletes. So, look, I'll spare you guys all the boring legal stuff of this, but basically the NCAA, the other part of this, they're going to pay nearly $2.8 billion in back damages over the next 10 years to athletes who competed in college from 2016 through present day. Back pay for NIL they missed out on. But that aside, moving forward, starting on July 1st, each school can pay its athletes up to a certain limit. The annual cap is expected to start at roughly $20.5 million per school in 2025 and 2026 and increase every year during the decade-long deal. These new payments are in addition to scholarships and other benefits the athletes already receive. Friday's order is a major milestone in a long push to remove outdated amateurism. Of course, we've had NIL for the last 4 years. This is separate from that. The settlement basically approved questions about whether athletes should be considered employees and the current rules and all that. That's all out the window now. This is going to put an end to that. Charlie Baker believes this deal will help schools regain control and tamp down the skyrocketing unregulated market for paying players through third parties. A lot like, big money boosters funding money through collectives to pay players. Now, salary caps and free agency restrictions, all that is legal because they're negotiated as part of a collective bargaining agreement in the professional sports. College sports leaders say many schools won't be able to afford to fund their teams if players are deemed to be employees and allowed to unionize. So this was the first step in kind of getting away from that, they're hoping. Now, the power conferences are launching a new enforcement organization to monitor payments that come from schools and boosters. And the new enforcement organization will be called the College Sports Commission. On Friday, it was announced Major League Baseball executive Brian Seeley is going to serve as the CEO. His job is described as having to build out the organization's investigative and enforcement teams and oversee all of its ongoing operations and stakeholder relationships. So basically, each school's athletic department can decide how it will divide that money among athletes. Not many major programs have shared, how they're going to budget all this. But those that say they have will spend the overwhelming majority, about 90% of their budget, on football and men's basketball. Of course, Title IX comes into play here. You're going to get some lawsuits from the female sports saying, where's our cut of the pie? We should have a little bit bigger cut of this. Athletes are still allowed to make money from selling their rights to their name, image, and likeness to other parties. That's the other part of this. And the College Sports Commission is going to try to stop boosters from using NIL deals as additional salary payments. Football rosters are going to shrink to 105 players, resulting in schools cutting probably around 20 players, though a lot of schools are going to try to grandfather in current athletes. And then you could just opt to pay walk-ons if you'd like now. But schools plan to divvy up, like I said, that $20.5 million among their sports. And most people think it'll go 75% to football, 15% to basketball, 5% to women's basketball, and 5% to the other sports. Of course, that's up to the schools. They can do what they want. We'll talk about it, but Kentucky could put 40% of this towards their basketball team if they want. Vanderbilt can put 20% towards their baseball team, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. But the very interesting part of this, the College Sports Commission, the power conferences hired Deloitte and LBI, major players in revenue management for pro sports, they're going to develop software to dissect NIL deals and track players' revenue sharing contracts. So you've got the school paying the player from this revenue sharing, money that's coming from the TV deals, but they're still going to allow players to sign NIL deals, but it has to be approved through the College Sports Commission. And any NIL deal over $600 will have to go through this clearinghouse called NIL Go. Deloitte will use data from past endorsement deals, and they will review boosters' NIL deals and determine whether an agreement exceeds an athlete's fair market value. So again, this stuff is very subjective. Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, saying, I certainly think this is something we'll have to look at on a coordinated basis. Is there an arbitration process? We'll have to do a lot of fact finding. Schools are expected to pay Deloitte as little as $5,000, but as much as $500,000 for the use of this software. Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, coming out and saying the approval of the House settlement agreement represents a significant milestone for the meaningful support of our student athletes and a pivotal step toward establishing long-term sustainability for college sports, two of the SEC's top priorities. As the journey to modernize college sports continues, we remain focused on identifying and implementing innovative opportunities for our student athletes across all sports while maintaining the core values that make college sports uniquely meaningful, blah, blah, blah. So basically what schools can do this? Well, any school that opted into the House settlement, that includes everybody in the Big 12, Big 10, SEC, they've all confirmed that they're going to pay out $20 million plus in revenue share. The AAC is requiring schools to revenue share $10 million with their athletes over the next 3 years. Even schools like Sacramento State and FCS school, they want to transition into FBS. They intend to share revenue. So it's going to be a lot of schools out there. But I want to go back to this Deloitte thing because this is very interesting. The new agreement, like we said, will allow players to sign outside contracts. According to the reports, Deloitte told ACC officials 90% of existing NIL contracts with public companies would have been approved. But they said more than 70% of deals with booster collectives would have been denied. What makes this very interesting is, let's say Tom's Tire Shop signs, I don't know, give me a player, Lenora Sellers to an endorsement deal at South Carolina. We're going to pay you $300,000, but you must record a commercial for us. You must make social media posts. You must come do once a month an autograph signing at our tire shop. That would be approved through Deloitte and the College Sports Commission because that is fair market value. $300,000 for what he's doing is fair market value. So stuff like that is still going to exist. And to be honest, I think players will have the opportunity to make more money from those still NIL deals than they will from the revenue sharing from the school. Because if you're capped at 20 to 24 million total to pay for your entire athletic department players, like every player, and what one estimate was around 13 to 16 million to football players, you're not going to pay a football player $1 million. That's a huge chunk of your earmarked money, right, from the revenue share. So what you may do is say, okay, your star athlete gets $300,000 from the school. Hey, brother, you better go sign some NIL deals to make up the rest of that money. So this will be very interesting to see. But like we said, 70% of deals with booster collectives would have been denied. The collectives are going to cease to exist at a lot of universities now. Like, what's the point other than I've seen some coming out and saying, we'll help you set up your social media accounts. We'll help you kind of set up your brand and market yourself and all this. But as far as going out and, funneling money through, hey, this booster gave us all this money and we're going to fund it through our collective, those days are kind of dead now with this agreement. Again, what's the future of this? And can these contracts be binding? Well, the answer is nobody knows. CBS Sports' Brandon Marcello talked about the Madden Iamaleava deal where he opted out of his deal with Arkansas and transferred to UCLA. That deal requires a buyout of 50% of the remainder of his contract should he transfer. So, again, going to be interested to see how they bind these agreements and hold these kids to these agreements. But anybody thinking this might be the end of all this, look, it doesn't solve the biggest remaining question around contracts, athlete movement, eligibility, NCAA enforcement power. I mean, there is a whole lot more still to go. And certainly the presidential commission still could be a thing that Donald Trump was putting together with Nick Saban and Tommy Tuberville. So there's a lot more to go here, but it certainly is a new day of college football. And I get it. People out there are like, I don't like this. This makes me uncomfortable. I don't like the employee, that they're not employees, but like players getting money directly from the schools, and it's legal now. Again, this is the new age of college football. Welcome to 2025 here on in the SEC and the world of college football. All right, when we return, we're going to catch up with our buddy Graham Coffey from Dog Central, get his thoughts on all this. He was tweeting up a storm about all the House, versus NCAA settlement. We'll talk about that coming up next right here on Locked On SEC. Hey, but first, I want to remind you guys, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night we have got some great, awesome action happening between the Thunder and the Pacers, and a really, really fun series to watch. And you can get in on the action at FanDuel.com, betting on a number of things, from what the players are going to do, over-unders, in-game bets, whatever it is. You can take advantage over at FanDuel.com. They got player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. You have more ways than ever to get in on the action and win big. We've been telling you guys also, FanDuel's got all the college football lines for week one. You see them on the ticker behind me. All the week one games up there, just about in the SEC. They got a line for it at FanDuel. They got over-under win totals for a lot of the SEC schools. They got Heisman odds. A lot of it is all up there on your future bets at FanDuel.com. Head to FanDuel.com right now and take advantage of all the great stuff. If you've never signed up before, like we told you earlier, you can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. Check them out today and get signed up. We're along here, Locked On SEC, and we are talking all things about this new House settlement, and amateurism is dead in college football, and nobody better to talk to us about things that are dead than our buddy Graham Coffey, host of course, covers all the Georgia Bulldogs with Dog Central. And Graham, some people might say Georgia is dead with not winning a championship the last couple of years. But welcome in, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to see you in the summertime. It's nice to see your face.
Yeah, we'll be at SEC Media Days here before you know it. All that's coming up very, very soon. But a monumental day. I mean, it's a dud. We always talk about Friday news dump, like literally Friday evening to go down is like, thanks, Judge in Oakland, for waiting till the worst opportune time. But everybody's been all abuzz all weekend about what this means. The House settlement is approved. College athletics once again changing. Give me your kind of just general overall view of takeaway of what all this means.
Well, I mean, I made a comment the other day, or the night that it happened on Friday night, that like this is probably the closest that college sports has been to the college sports that we all grew up with and knew and loved since NIL went into effect and became legal nationally on July 1st, 2021. So if you look at the last 4 years, we've gone into this time of NIL is not really been about name, image, and likeness and endorsements, right? It has become a booster funded payroll with the advent of these collectives and all of the kind of big money guaranteed up front. Like, as someone who covers big recruitments all the time that Georgia is involved in, like I've said as honestly as I can to our subscribers, like, there's some of these recruitments now where relationships matter, and the kid's about, let me find development and where to compete for championships. And there's some of them that you get to the last 48 hours and you find out like who wants the PR win and the player the most desperately, and who's just going to drop the biggest bag. And that's when it's all decided. And that doesn't make it very much fun to follow until the last 48 hours. And then it's really fun to follow. But with this settlement, I think the big headline here is that in a way, the amateurism has never been more dead because schools are going to share revenue with their athletes. And that's never happened before. Like, the schools are directly paying the players. They're not employees, obviously. They don't want to give them employment status, but they are directly paying these players. $20 to $22 million a year is going to be the cap on the amount that can be shared at the top of the sport with school, SEC schools and other Power Four conference style schools. Probably about 75% of that money will go to football in most places. But the beauty of this is we now know kind of everybody has a payroll, right? That is somewhat even. Maybe one's 13 million, maybe one's 16 million, but that's a lot closer together than a lot of these numbers that are happening today, where Mark Bowman, the 5-star tight end that just signed with USC, and that deal was done to try and get it in before this settlement came into effect. I mean, we're talking $6 million like guaranteed for a kid that's never taken a college snap. You can't do that moving forward without taking a massive gamble and a huge risk at not just crippling an entire position room, but crippling a program. Because we all know not every recruit pans out, right? So I think that you're going to see a little bit more of a trend towards money and big money going to proven college players. I don't think you'll see as big of a discrepancy between, a Georgia and, pick a school, or, I mean, Georgia hasn't even been, among the biggest, a Texas, right? Like, we've all seen the headlines on like the amount of money that Texas is allegedly spending. You're not going to see, a school like that at 30 million and then another school in their same conference on their schedule that's only spending, 8, 10, 12. Like, this will bring the gaps back together much closer. And I think the exciting part about it a little bit is that we can maybe start talking more about exactly what's going on. Like, you cover the NFL in Houston, obviously, and you cover the Astros, right? Like, you talk about salary cap decisions, you talk about free agency decisions, you talk about, this is what money's left over for them to work with. We can't do that in college football because we don't know what anybody's working with, right? So maybe we can have a little bit more intelligent discussions besides just, hey, a guy that I talked to that works at this agency told me they dropped this giant bag on this kid, or a coach at a rival staff said that, or whatever it might be. And I also am excited about this because it turns NIL back into what NIL was really intended to be, which is, these kids can go and they can still get paid to do advertisements and all of that stuff, but we're not going to have a 17-year-old kid with 2,000 followers on social media who is making 1.5 million. And that's because of this clearinghouse that's coming in.
Well, I'll circle back to that because I do want to get to the clearinghouse, but just to kind of set the table. So, yes, this is revenue share based off basically these big fat TV contracts that have gotten completely out of hand. That the SEC's getting $1 billion from ESPN, ABC, SEC Network, all that combined. So that revenue is a percentage of that is getting shared with the players. 20, like you said, 20.5 million. And then I saw some people saying basically it's now up to the schools, like, they need to decide how they spread that out, because that's not just for football, that's for all athletics. And so if you've got a good softball team, if you got a good baseball team, if you've got a good basketball team, all that's coming out of this same pot. And so I've seen some people guessing around, they said 13 to 16 million of that pie will go to football. But again, that's kind of up to the schools, right?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I would imagine a school like Kentucky is going to prioritize basketball much more than a school like Georgia will, and I think you look around, there's probably better ROI for some of these schools that are not competitive in football. And even with an even NIL, like, they're still not, I think for Texas Tech, right? Let's use them as an example, because they've been in the news a lot lately with having a big booster that's sort of bankrolling a lot of big NIL decisions. I know this is an SEC podcast, but we'll use them for a second because they went and signed that softball pitcher from Stanford for 7 figures, and they're in the finals of the Women's College World Series. And you've got Patrick Mahomes tweeting about it. Like, the ROI on that $1 million for the brand visibility of Texas Tech is much better than maybe spending an extra $1 million in football and still going 8-4 or 9-3 in the Big 12 and probably missing the playoff at that record, right? So I'm interested to see how some of these universities decide to allot that $20 to $22 million, because I think there could be some creative usage of that money and sort of people that are kind of growth hacking or finding value in other ways.
Yeah, the tough part of it is too, like, you can't just completely ignore football because that's where this revenue is coming from. So if you're Vanderbilt, you could just say, we're going to put zero into football. We're going to pull it all into baseball and basketball. Well, then 2 years from now, the SEC's going, Vandy, you're out of the SEC because your team sucks so bad. So it's like you still have to give a good percentage of this to football.
Yeah, you have to still make an effort there. And I think that, you're going to be in a spot where I'm happy about this, because if you talk about the amount of money that football is making, that SEC football is producing, and that, we are seeing come in with these big TV contracts, like the idea that boosters should have ever been bankrolling anything for this sport, that like, hey, common fan, that was the NIL model that a lot of schools felt like was going to be the most sustainable, was let's get 40,000 fans to sign up and give, $8.99 a month to this collective, or, to what we're doing here. And it's like, that's insane. I mean, they're already buying tickets from you. You're already getting a license fee on the merch they buy. There's enough money there. So I'm happy to see that the donor fatigue thing, I think, has been very real and continuing to get worse throughout this sort of collective booster funded era of NIL. And now we don't have collectives, I mean, they're basically all in house. So they aren't really collectives anymore at this point.
We'll continue our conversation with Graham Coffey of Dog Central, and talking about this new historic lawsuit where amateurism is basically dead. And I did want to get into the conversation, Graham, of the clearinghouse, because this is something that I think a lot of people are having trouble understanding, that the NCAA is going to default to this group Deloitte, basically, to be their clearinghouse to monitor all NIL deals moving forward. And so a lot of people think this could be the death of the collectives, because the whole thing was the collectives was to raise money to pay players to come play, pay for play. Whereas, it seems like the NCAA is trying to go, well, look, if we're going to have NIL, it's got to be real NIL, name, image, and likeness, so much to the point that they are capping this at $600. Anything over $600 that a player's getting, it's
Right.
got to be approved through the clearinghouse. So it looks like they're trying to get a wrangle on this thing, where the Michigan booster who played Bryce Underwood, whatever it was, 10 million to sway him away from LSU.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Deloitte, they're a big accounting firm. Like they're good at numbers. They understand how to do this. They are the right. The first thing that I ever thought when I heard that they were trying to bring Deloitte in to do this was like, oh, this might actually have a chance of working, because the NCAA is not good at bureaucracy, and we know that, and we've seen them try to navigate things and make decisions, and there's always a missing element to that, it seems like. But if you look at there's a 12-point analysis that they're going to go through to evaluate these NIL deals, and I think this is the biggest thing to me that is probably something I find hopeful, just in terms of how I view college sports, because if this works and if they actually do this with teeth, then we do get kind of back to a little bit more of everybody on a level-ish playing field than we were before. I mean, because people keep asking me, and I'm sure you've had people ask you this weekend, like, well, okay, so what's to stop, all right, the schools are sharing revenue now, but like, what's to stop a booster who owns a local fast food franchise or something from just, funneling a couple $1 million through that to a kid? And if you look at this 12-point, like, the first point on how they evaluate these will be the athlete's marketability and social media reach. So there has to be some sort of market standard that is in line with, like, hey, this is the amount of money that pro athlete X makes to be on a McDonald's commercial, and this is not at all in line with that, right? So there's comparable market benchmarks. There's a lot of stuff that they're going to look at, like there can't be exclusivity clauses. There cannot be, the timing of the deal, even relative to recruiting and transfers, like that is going to be under scrutiny. So I think that, I've thought a lot of things in the last 4 years under NIL, but I think that like this can work in a way that actually moves us forward in a positive step.
Yeah, what I found so interesting, I was reading the CBS Sports article on this, and they said the clearinghouse run by Deloitte is to ensure fair market value based on an actual endorsement. And so basically what they're doing is, yeah, you can be a big I guess, booster, supporter of the athletics that owns your own business, say you own a tire company or a car dealership, you could sign that athlete to, I don't know, a $300,000 deal, but you better be getting that return on investment. Now, there are I saw a couple lawyers pointing out, who's going to track that they actually follow up on this? All Deloitte is trying to say is, this is what was agreed to, and that's that. We think it's fair. So this is where I think there is some wiggle room where NIL, you can get creative going, look, he signed this deal with this dealership. He agreed to this, this, and this. We think that's fair market value, and it's done. Who's going to follow up and go, hey, did you do those signings? We need to make sure you did those.
No, that's a great point. I mean, we've seen that with all sorts of deals. Like I think that came into question with some of the Nico stuff with that lawsuit, with him transferring out. So there definitely is that to, and I don't know who's going to monitor that, but the good news here is I think this whole deal has already gone under the scrutiny of a federal judge, and the NCAA has kept getting its butt kicked in federal court for the last decade, right? I mean, you lose 9-0 in the Supreme Court. That's like getting, that's like what Georgia did to TCU in that national championship game. Like that, it's that scale. So there is hope that this won't be overturned, right? But I also think that you look at Sankey's trying to get the SEC and the Big Ten and Big 12 and ACC, like all of the conference commissioners are trying to get their schools basically to opt in and agree, like, we are not going to try and countersue or sue if there's an enforcement case that comes down over an NIL behavior related to our school. Like, we aren't going to try and challenge the validity of the settlement. You might fight the NCAA case, right? But really what they're trying to do here is give the NCAA's enforcement arm its teeth back and let it go bite some people, I think.
Well, one more thing on this. It said, according to reports, Deloitte told ACC officials 90% of existing NIL contracts with public companies would have been approved. So like the ones that are doing it, those are fine. They said 70% of the deals with booster collectives would have been denied. So I think you're going to see a lot of these collectives go away. Now, some are saying we're going to stay active just to make sure we help people, these athletes maintain their social media presence and stuff like that. So this is where it could get really like, hey, let us help you create your platform and then you can go sell it, but we're not going to sell it for you. You're going to go sell it. This is where it's going to get really sticky.
It is going to get really sticky. And I mean, a lot of these collectives here in the last couple of years have been sort of preparing for this legislation to come through or not legislation, but for this settlement to come through and to be ready for that. And I think that they've sort of shifted into like, we are here to attract deals for you. We're not here to pay you directly. The good news is, like when Brock Bowers was in his last year at Georgia, there was a lot of stories that came out about he's not taking any NIL money because he's got all these other like legitimate endorsements, right? So he's just leaving the NIL money that he would have gotten to the rest of his teammates. It's like, well, that's his payroll, so the payroll side of this is going to be handled by the universities through revenue share. And the guys who are actually famous and who are actually at the top 1% of the sport and, have the profile that's deserving of being a pitch man or an endorser of some business, like they can go and do that. And there's not going to be any cap on the money they can make. The good news though, I think for some of this player movement stuff with the portal, right, is we hear about tampering all the time. And, hey, this school's tampering with our kid or whatever. It's like, well, so what are they tampering with the kid about, right? It's money. They're offering him money and they're saying, get in the portal and we'll give you a bunch of money to come to our school. Well, at this point with a more even sort of, revenue share, like you don't have the carrot to dangle as much if you're, big Power 5 school X trying to grab a star defensive back out of a Toledo or something, right? Like most of these schools, if they want to keep their star players, they're going to have enough money under revenue share to do that. And so I do think we'll shift back within a couple of years, maybe even sooner, to going back to like high school recruiting has always been the way to build a championship winner, even in this portal era. But I think the emphasis is going to move back in that direction even more. And, you might see a Ole Miss that's super portal heavy struggle under this format.
One more on that, Graham. If you're what do you think the most is a player will be made? If it's $20 million for all the sports, like the star football player getting paid by the school, like $1 million is a lot. $1 million is a lot for one player.
It is. Yeah, it's a ton. And you look at the NFL, the way that teams win titles, right? It is at least just I'm just going to go to the football framework here. What's the recipe? You want to have a quarterback on a rookie deal because of, they haven't been a free agent yet. So maybe they're a third-year guy who is a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the league, but they're not getting paid like it yet because that leaves you money to build your lines and all these other positions. And I'm curious if in college football, you'll have that returning, like an Arch Manning, right? Or somebody who might be, he's probably a bad example because he hasn't played yet, but a Carson Beck for Georgia last year, right? Would he have fetched 20% of the team payroll coming back after the season he had in 2023? I don't know, but to me, it's you can justify paying quarterbacks 20-25% of your entire salary cap if you want, if you're a football program. But is that the best way to build a competitive roster top to bottom? Probably not.
And imagine paying that kid 20% of your payroll and he sucks. Then you're really up the creek.
And that's what's interesting about this from a recruiting standpoint. Because just from a Georgia perspective, and I know there's others that have been in the midst of this too, but Georgia has been trying to sign some high-profile 5-star players in recent months, and they've gotten down to the wire, and those kids have gone elsewhere because they've been guaranteed, $3 million, $4 million, whatever it is. And it's not just that they're guaranteed that money, it's that they're getting paid the lion's share of that money up front because any payments that happened after midnight on Friday are now subject to the scrutiny under this new deal. So if a kid's, getting $5 million, well, if you don't pay him $4 million now, then that means that you are going to have to pay him $1 or $1.25 million a year over 4 years once he gets into school. And that hit's going to come out of the $15 million you have to build your entire roster with. And that's a very different proposition. So I'm curious to see how this affects the rest of the 2026 recruiting cycle and then thereon after into the next future cycles.
It's why Graham Coffey runs his own thing and doesn't pay 35 other employees and divvy up all the money. He's got to keep that money for himself. Let everybody know what you got going on over there at Dog Central.
Yeah. If you're a Georgia fan, I think we do as good a job as anybody. Inside intel, in-depth, analysis, breakdowns and good stuff like that in season. And then we have a great message board community, honestly, that is fully focused on college sports. We have never had a political post in the history of our website. Very, very proud of that. And, kind of lacks the usual vitriol that you get in the classic message board environment. So if you want to have some more kind of tame conversations with fellow Georgia fans, come and check us out, dogcentral.com.
I'm excited. I saw Gunnar Stockton's going to be at the Manning Passing Academy at the end of the month, so good honor there for him. And are we all aboard? Are we all aboard the Stockton hype train now?
I don't know if I'm all aboard the Stockton hype train, but I think that Georgia's 2025 team has much bigger questions than Gunnar Stockton. We saw him play against Notre Dame. He showed he can take care of the football when he gets the proper help from his offensive line. He made good decisions. He didn't wreck the game for them. He made some really plus value deep throws that is something that offense has missed for a couple of years for all of Carson Beck's strengths. That wasn't one of the things he was good at, was that the true deep ball. So I think that if the roster around him is up to snuff, that Gunnar can take them, very, very far. I have questions about offensive line, defensive line, and those kind of things.
I love the addition of Josh McCray, by the way. If you don't know the name, coming over from Illinois, him and Nate Frazier together, I think going to be an electric
thunder and lightning, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's going to be great. Graham, thanks for the time, man. As always, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always appreciate you having me on.
All right, that is Graham Coffey there of Dog Central. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out our buddy Brian Smith on the Portal Show, talking all things latest with recruiting, latest with the transfer portal, and all that. He has got you covered over there at the portal. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Our thanks again to Graham Coffey. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on an all-new edition of Locked On SEC.